Well, good evening, everybody. This is your host, Mason Sims, and thank you for tuning in to another episode this evening. Joining us this evening is Mr. Joe White. He is the state representative for the Newberry and Prosperity areas of South Carolina, and he'll be sharing with us some of the things that happened last night when the new budget was approved, and also share with us how he had got involved in politics and made his run for state representative back in 2022. So again, thank you for tuning in this evening, and let's get started. Well, good evening, everybody. This is your host, Mason Sims, and with me today I have Representative Mr. Joe White. He is the representative for the Newberry and Prosperity area in South Carolina. And Joe, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mason. Good to be with you.
Absolutely. So I'm sure a lot of those that follow state politics are familiar with who you are, but those that maybe just follow the federal and elections, feel free to tell us about yourself.
Well, I was a businessman for 35 years, started my own business in 1970, no, 1977, no, 1982, I'm sorry. And my wife and I ran that business for 35 years. We were very successful in that business. It was a medical equipment rental business, mainly respiratory equipment like CPAP, oxygen, and ventilators. And in 19, no, in 20, um, 17, we retired. We turned that business over to five of our key employees. Uh, they now own the business. They're doing a good job. They've been running it now for almost 8 years. And I told them when I left, you'll have five brains working on this instead of just one. So y'all should do a better job than I did. And they have done an exceptional job. So that's what I did in the past. The year 2020 uh, messed me up mentally, uh, emotionally, everything that happened in 2020 from, of course, the first thing was the mask mandates. I'm in the respiratory business. I knew that the paper mask that we were buying from China was not going to help anything. Uh, I had respiratory therapists. If they were in a home that had airborne pathogens in it, they had to put a mask on that would really protect them. And I knew those little paper masks were not going to do anything. So I was one of those people that kind of resisted that whole thing. And then, as you know, George Floyd got killed in that spring. And I was watching people burn down the country that I love. Um, I was frustrated. Um, the election in November of 2020 created more frustration for me. So by January the 6th of 2021, my wife had the intelligence to tell me to quit watching TV. So I ended up buying three books. Um, the first one I bought was written by Trey Gowdy. And I think the name of that book is It Doesn't Hurt to Ask. And I read that, and it made me begin to think about uh, what I might be able to do to alter the situation we were under in the state of South Carolina. Later that year, I bought a book by a guy named Eric Metaxas, and that book was If You Can Keep It. You know, that's what the lady said to Ben Franklin outside Independence Hall the day they signed the Constitution. She said, Mr. Franklin, have you given us a republic or a monarchy? And he said, a republic if you can keep it. So Eric Metaxas talks about in his book how close we are to losing the republic. And so that put some more seeds in my brain. And later that year, I bought a book. The name of it was I, Citizen. And that book made me realize that if we want to have self-governance, that we have to get personally involved. So
Let's
I
start from
began
the grassroots.
to, yeah. And so I began to try to find somebody that I could trust to represent me in my district. And you can't see it over my shoulder, but I had a little thing that I was sending out that says, if not now, then when? If not you, then who? And as I spoke at different places, I would pass that out. I'd try to get people to sign up to run for any office, county council, city, didn't matter. And but I never could find somebody that was willing to run for state house. And so uh, I guess it's in February of 2022. that one morning I'm sitting in my easy chair, which is just to the left of me right now. I was listening to my elevator music. At that point, I'm 76 years old. Um, and I just knew that the Lord was saying, it's now and it's you. As, the who and the when. So when my wife got up, I said, Linda, I think I'm supposed to run for this state house seat. And she said, are you crazy? I said, probably, but I just know that I'm, I think the Lord's telling me that's what I need to do. So within 48 hours, she came to me and she said, I think we are supposed to run for this office. So I registered to run. I had been in Newberry County only 12 years. I didn't know anybody in Newberry County. We had lived in Lexington County for the previous 40 years. Uh, so here I am, a
Was that
70.
hard? Say, was that hard canvassing as far as getting your name recognition out there? Was that difficult with?
It's you just have to knock on doors. I mean, you can buy a list of people that typically vote in the Republican primary, and so I didn't knock on Democrat doors, and I didn't knock on doors of people that just vote in the general election, but I did go knock on almost 2,000 doors of people that vote in the Republican primary and introduce myself to them. I didn't know any of them. None of them knew me. And when the primary was held in June, I became the state legislator for all of Newberry County and 2 precincts in Lexington County. So, like I said, 76, didn't know a thing about the state house. I'd never been to the state house before then. I didn't know I got a parking place at the state house. I didn't know I had an office at the state house. All I knew was that the salary was $10,400 a year, and I felt like I was supposed to be serving the people of District 40. So that's how I got involved in this thing, and it's been quite an eye opener. I'll just say that.
Yeah, and I was surprised too when I was doing when I did some research yesterday. I didn't realize this. You got elected, in 2023. From when I heard you speak at the Pickens Republican Party meeting, it sounds like you've been there for a long time as far as knowing the issues. You're very knowledgeable about it, and I was surprised. I thought you had served a lot longer than just 2 years.
You know, uh, uh, I am somebody that when I have something on my mind, I'm intense in my study and development of that thing. And so when I got elected, I mean, the thing I ran on was judicial reform. Um, Nobody knew what judicial reform meant. I mean, I went all over the state explaining to people that the way we elect judges in South Carolina, we're the only place in the country that does it the way we do it. And that is that we let a judicial merit selection commission, which is comprised currently of 8 trial lawyers and 2 other people, determine who our judges are about to be. And then they send 3 names to the legislature, and we get to pick from those 3 names that trial lawyers have already pre-selected for us. And so I would ask a question. I would say, are you a Clemson fan? And people say, yes. I say, well, let me ask a question. Do you think it's okay for South Carolina's coaches to pick the referees in this fall's football game? And they always say, well, no. And I say, well, I don't either. But that's what we do in South Carolina. We let trial lawyers pick the referees, and that's wrong. So what's interesting is in the presidential primary in 2023, that referendum item was put on the presidential primary. Do you think we need judicial reform in South Carolina? 91% of the people said yes. So between me and our attorney general and a guy named David Pascoe, we had spread the word across the state about how bad our judicial system really is in South Carolina. And so when we went into the legislative session in 2023, there was a lot of pressure on that legislative group to do something. So for the first time in the history of South Carolina, we now have 4 people on the Judicial Merit Selection Commission, that will be appointed by the executive branch, the governor. So there'll be 12 people on that commission, 4 of whom will be appointed by the executive branch. The other 8 will still be appointed by the legislative branch. My goal, and I've got a bill out there right now, to make it so the executive branch appoints everybody to the JMSC. But that was my issue, and nobody knew what I was talking about. So that's how bad at
Yeah.
politics I am. I'm
Yeah.
knocking on
So
doors.
it,
People, we need to fix the judicial system, and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. So
yeah, I agree with it. Yeah, because when I ran for county council, I mean, a majority of the people didn't even know who the incumbent was or really what county council itself was. It just shows that a lot of people aren't informed and don't really keep up as much as they probably should.
I was one of those
Yeah,
people. I was one of those people. I mean,
yeah.
I
That
had never
was
paid any attention to state politics until I decided to run for office.
Yeah, that was me too, especially in 2020. I didn't know what a state representative was and anything below like governor or president. That's really the only things I paid attention to in the past.
Sad, isn't it? Sad commentary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah. So the one thing I was gonna ask you is you mentioned that yesterday a budget was passed. Could you kind of elaborate on that, what all that entailed?
Yeah, the process for the budget is is a fairly complex. The first thing that happens every year is the governor sends us what his recommendation is for the budget for the next 12 months. Uh, we basically shred that, pay no attention to what the governor says he thinks the budget should be, and the legislature begins to form a budget. The House has all these different agencies come in and pitch how much they need to operate the next 12 months. That's a pretty interesting thing to watch. Different subcommittees of Ways and Means having all the different agencies come in and say, okay, now we need this, and this is why we need this. So the process plays itself out over 2 or 3 months, and eventually the House comes up with a budget. Um, the only 2 things that the legislature is required by law to do every year. We're required to elect judges, and we're required to come up with a budget. So that's the only 2 things we have to do by law. So the House presents their budget. We debate it. That's usually a very long debate with a lot of people making amendments. I made a couple of amendments myself. Uh, Basically, the establishment shoots down all those amendments because they've already decided they want the budget the way they printed it. And so we make our argument for why we think we should alter the budget, and we get voted down. Our amendments get tabled. So, but eventually we vote on a budget. We then send that to the Senate, and the Senate looks over our budget and says, well, I like this piece. I don't like this piece. I think we need to add money here. I think we need to take money away here. So once they look over it, they vote on it, and then they send it back to the House for us to concur with the changes they made. Well, that's never going to happen. We're never going to concur with the changes that the Senate made. And so when we don't concur, they create a conference committee, 3 people appointed by the House and 3 people appointed by the Senate. And you have to have at least one from the minority party from the House and one from the minority party from the Senate. So 2 Democrats, 4 Republicans then sit down and work up an agreement to then present back to the Senate and back to the House to approve the compromise budget. Um, so the Senate approved that early yesterday. We approved that late yesterday. Um, I'm one of those 25 people that voted against the budget for my 3rd year in a row. There are so many things that I see in the budget that I think we are spending money on needlessly. I happen to believe that we've got 3 basic core functions that we should spend our money on: infrastructure, which is mainly roads; um, public safety, which is police departments, criminal justice system, and schools K through 12. I think that's the 3 core functions of state government in South Carolina. So I always push for spending more money on those things and taking money out of the things that may not be as essential for the government in South Carolina. I'll give you an example. Uh, this year, um, our, I guess it's called the film department, whatever it's called, we've been given $10 million in subsidies for people to do film in South Carolina. Um, in the budget, it was to increase that to 30 million. I'm against that. I think that until we get our roads fixed, we have a K through 12 education system that we can be proud of, not 42nd in the country. The roads are the worst in the nation. Number one
They are.
in DOT's annual report, number one in the nation in deaths and serious injuries on rural roads in the nation. 50 states.
Yeah.
We're number one. We're number three in DUIs, deaths due to DUIs in the nation. So public safety and roads, I think, are very important. Any dollar that we spend on those to improve those, I think is very important. But the dollars that we spend on $500,000 for a wine festival or $300,000 for a BMX rally, I think are pretty bad ways to spend taxpayer money. So I have voted against the budget 3 years in a row. This time we did have the most we've ever had to vote against the budget. We had 25 this time. This year we put something in the budget that I think everybody in South Carolina should be mad about. We approved a raise for ourselves of $18,000 a year. Um,
When does that go into effect?
July 1st, I think. Next year's budget. I don't think that an elected official should ever be able to vote for a raise for themselves. I think that should be a public referendum, or that should be something that's done by executive order, or that should be something that it shouldn't be us saying, we think we deserve a raise, so we're going to. I mean, that's 80% increase in our pay. Now, I like part of that. I just don't like us being able to do that for ourselves. I, I think that it's good. I think it's good that it's raising the pay of state legislators, but I think it should have taken effect after the next election cycle. Let us vote on raising the pay of people after the next election, not now. So
Will that go in effect with the Senate too, as far as the salaries go?
the Senate that proposed that, we actually voted it down in the House, but when the budget came back, the conference committee had left it in there, and so it was approved yesterday. Yeah,
Yeah, and it hadn't really been raised in a while, has
long
it? Like
time,
for
30 years. Yeah. So,
yeah,
yeah, I
not
think this
great.
should have been along the way, and I like something that somebody said yesterday. Why don't we put in there some kind of cost of living increase so that you won't come up 30 years from now and say, let's give another raise to the legislature. Um, so that's really a thing called in-district allowance, which used to be $1,000, and now it's going to be 2,500 a month.
Okay,
So,
well that's good.
but
Yeah,
let's
and
go back to that budget process. I said something to you earlier. Um, we're about out of time, aren't we? The budget process, there's
see that.
really three pieces to the budget. We in the legislature only have control over one third piece. Um, we have control over the revenues received due to taxes, whether that's property tax or income tax, sales tax, gasoline tax. There's another piece of the budget, which is about our piece is 14.7 billion this year. There's another piece that's 13 billion plus. That's tuition fees and fines. So that's another piece that we don't have any control over. And then there's a federal piece, which will be another 14 billion or so. So ultimately, our budget's going to be about $42 billion, but the state legislature only has control over about 14.7 billion of that 42 billion.
Okay, and I think another thing I was going to ask you too is some people had mentioned about the Scout motor deal going sour. Is that something that the I'm guessing that's something that the state legislature and Senate had worked on.
Uh, I was one of 13 people that voted against the Scout Motor deal. I have been to the Scout Motor plant to see what's going on out there. It's a mess. Uh, I never went to the nuclear plant fiasco, the VC Summer thing in Fairfield County, but from what I understand, we're looking at the same type of mess. You know, the VC Summer thing cost the taxpayers of South Carolina several $billions, at least $6 billion, maybe as much as $9 billion. The Scout Motor thing right now, we spent $1.3 billion on it, but if it goes south, they'll keep on coming back and asking for more money, and so there's no telling what's going to end up happening. Uh, they actually asked for $100 million for a training facility at the University of South Carolina, and I think we put in the budget $25 million for that, but specifically to train people to work at Scout Motors. So I'm just not a person that believes that government should be subsidizing private industry. Um, I think if private industry can't make it without government assistance, they shouldn't be in business. So I'm just one of those crazy guys. Yeah. Well, being a private businessman myself for 35 years, you have peaks and valleys. And when you're in the valley, man, you just have to figure out how to get out of the valley. You just have to work it out. You know, I mean, when I got a contract one time and went to my banker and told him I needed to borrow $500,000, he laughed at me. He said, "Joe, we have to lie to get you $10,000." So I ended up having to go to a small business broker and pay 17% interest to borrow $500,000. There's a way. You just have to be willing to assume the risk. So.
Yes, and the other thing I wanted to mention too is I know there's been several things about the Curtis Loftus situation. Is that something that did the House end up voting on that? 'Cause I know the Senate had voted to
House
remove
never
him from
took up
office.
House never took any of that up. I have some very personal feelings about that. Uh, you know, the audit report that came back from the outside auditor had 35 recommendations for South Carolina to fix their financial system. 34 of those were directed at the Comptroller General's office. One of those was directed at the Treasurer's office. The Comptroller General, as you know, resigned 2 years ago because he knew that the things they were doing were not being done very well. I don't believe Curtis has done anything wrong. I just don't. I think that that $1.8 billion that was there, and he testified it was there. Uh, the reason he testified it was there was the Comptroller General said it was there, the auditor said it was there, and his actual testimony was, according to the reports of outside people, there is $1.8 billion missing. When all that was going on, I called Senator Grooms, who was leading that investigation, and I said, "Tell me what you believe about this 1.8 billion." And here's what he said. He said, "We know it's real. We think that 500 million of it is DOT money, but we think that that was DOT money that was federally given to us. And because we have not used it, we're going to have to pay interest on that when we find it. We also think that 300 million of that belongs to DSS, which was also federally funded. So that's where we think 800 million of the 1.8 billion is. But we know it's real. Outside auditor comes in, look at the computer. They say it never existed. Uh, it was a it was a clerical error. Here's what I've been told. All the treasurer does is take the money that the comptroller general says we have and keep so much in the bank on cash every day and invest the rest. That's what the treasurer does. He says, "Okay, we got to keep 5 million in the cash fund for tomorrow, and we've got 42 billion to invest tonight." That's based on what comptroller general tells him. Um, the Comptroller General, when they try to balance their books in the past, would say, well, we're out of balance $150 million. So they do like I do when I balance my checkbook. My wife doesn't do this, but I say, hey, if we're off a few pennies, let's just not worry about it. Just we're off. So just scratch that out and put in whatever the bank says we've got. So the way I understand it, the Comptroller General would consistently do that. And over an 11-year time period, his books got out of balance almost $5 billion by just making corrections to entries without having any substance behind the correction. So, hey, what we need is accountability in
That's right.
everything in government, from top to bottom. We need accountability, and I fight for that every day.
Yeah. Now just curious what I know it's been mixed feelings about Curtis Loftus. I was just kind of curious what your thoughts were on it. Just
Well, uh,
because,
I have not seen anything so far from what Curtis has done that makes me think he was intentionally cooking the books. Um, he, his role in our finances is not as significant as the role of the auditor and the comptroller general. Like I say, he takes their figures and says, I've got this much to invest tonight, and I've got this much to keep in cash tonight. So he knew it was out of balance. He just didn't know how much it was. He and the comptroller general kept on saying for years, we need to get together and fix our books. They never did it.
yeah, well, that mistakes happen. So yeah, just hopefully this will be a good or bad. Hopefully this will be a good learning experience. He can move forward from it. So is there anything else you'd like to mention to our viewers this evening?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to say hi. So thank you.
Absolutely. And Joe, thank you again for agreeing to come on here, and we'd love to have you again in the future. And that concludes our show for this evening. If you have not already, please feel free to click like, share, and subscribe on our YouTube channel for future updates, and also follow our Facebook page as well. I hope that everyone has had a great week so far. And tonight I'm actually asking for your help. So yesterday I'd been on the phone with Mark Lynch's campaign to get a town hall set up for possibly later on this summer. And it would be great if we could get a debate between Mark Lynch and Lindsey Graham. So if any of you have connections to that, just feel free to help me out there. And I'm also trying to get an event either in like Pickens or Greenville County that will be able to help us fill up the auditorium as far as, or be able to host us as far as having the debate goes. So I could really use your help for that, and just feel free to leave in the comments or send me a direct message to see if we can get something worked out. So again, thank you for all tuning in this evening. Good night to all, and God bless America. Thank you.